It's been a while since I talked about my favorite anime. Re:Zero Season 1 Episode 15 is what I believe to be the single greatest episode of any anime ever. I know that's a very bold statement that you probably disagree with, but hopefully you'll at least hear my argument. Of course, if you're willing to share your opinion, I still read every single comment because I'm always open to changing my mind. I'm not here to argue that Re:Zero is the best anime of all time because this episode is admittedly an anomaly. However, it is the best standalone episode I've ever seen, and trust me, I've seen a lot of episodes. I'm basically an anime veterinarian. I watched the entire Fate series in the wrong order, and I've watched all of One Piece except for the last 1,000 episodes. I also gave FMA Brotherhood a perfect score of 10 out of 10, even though I watched it over a decade ago and barely remember it. The point is, I know what I'm talking about, so you can totally trust all my opinions about everything. A lot of you might not know this about me, but Echidnut was born as a Re:Zero only YouTube channel. If you scroll back through my older videos, all of them are about Re:Zero. Most of you probably found me through my seasonal videos and tier lists, but I didn't start branching out from Re:Zero until I hit 100k subscribers. But because I recently hit 200k, I thought I'd make another Re:Zero video to show all my new subscribers how my channel began. I've come a long way since then, I've made a lot of great friends, and I've even started getting sponsorships. Like this one. Raid Shadow Legends is the first game to bring a console-level experience to your phone with new game modes and content updates every couple months. Some of these amazing additions include the Doom Tower with 120 challenging floors, new bosses and heroes, an entirely new faction of Far East warriors known as the Shadowkin, and of course, the Hydra clan boss, one of the biggest and baddest bosses to ever set foot in Teleria. Download Raid with my link below, because this month, Raid has a non-stop schedule of special events including Season 3 of the Forge Pass with a limited edition artifact set and a lot of new skins and amazing rewards. Spoiler alert, Raid's fan-favorite champion Death Knight is finally getting the ultimate upgrade everyone's been waiting for. Just click the inbox here to get a free epic champion, Rector Drath, 200k silver, energy and XP boost, and an ancient shard so you can summon awesome champions as soon as you get in-game. There's never been a better time to get started in Raid because if you click my link in this video's description or scan my QR code on the screen, you can get about $30 worth of unique bonuses for free. Thank you again to Raid Shadow Legends for sponsoring this video. While this episode sometimes feels like a twisted nightmare intended to emotionally wound the viewer, it's impossible to ignore its beauty and the passion that went into it. Somehow, every detail was impeccable. The short yet excellent fight scenes, beautiful shots, theory-provoking dialogue, and an unrivaled shock value, but of course, the highlight of this episode was its masterfully delivered psychological and emotional impact. The only other episode of any media that compares to this was Breaking Bad's Ozymandias, which had 59 episodes of build-up allowing it to reach that level. But what allowed episode 15 of Re:Zero to flourish was the collective passion and genius from every party involved in its production. The writing, direction, music, and voiceover individually surpassed the pinnacle of perfection, but for all those pieces to also come together and complement one another was nothing short of a miracle. If this episode had even the tiniest flaw, it would have stood out like a sore cock. So I think a lot of luck was involved as well, but the most notable contributor to this episode's brilliance was the groundbreaking standard of cinematography that Re:Zero both introduced and retired in this episode. It came out of nowhere, left a dazzling impression, and then disappeared forever. This episode was truly an anomaly that won't be outclassed or replicated anytime in the foreseeable future. As a series, Re:Zero's primary strength was always the author's exceptional creativity, which naturally made it difficult for the anime to rival the source material. But this episode blew right past it and improved upon it in ways that have never again occurred in this anime. For the first and only time in Re:Zero, this episode made the source material its bitch. I could talk about it for hours, but I want to keep this video short, so without further hype, let's go ahead and analyze the masterpiece episode that made Re:Zero my favorite anime. Episode 15 picks up after one of the best cliffhangers in the series, where Subaru faces the horrific reality surrounding him, losing every ounce of confidence he'd been slowly building the past few episodes. Remember, this was right after Subaru successfully protected everyone from Meilei's dogs, resolved Rem's internal conflict, and stood up for Emilia in front of practically the entire kingdom. He had some giant balls is what I'm trying to say. It must have been June, because Subaru's pride was at an all-time high, however, this attack on the mansion erased it it completely. Notice how he tries to cling to his pride by reassuring himself that it's not his fault. Betelgeuse later corrects this notion when he forces Subaru to look at Rem's corpse, informing him that it is his fault. Ironically, Betelgeuse also asks him if he's pride, which was amusing because in that moment Subaru had none at all. But anyway, Subaru investigates his surroundings, finding everyone he cares about brutally massacred. Of course, this episode skips the opening, because at this point the audience is completely immersed, feeling as if we're right there with Subaru, experiencing the dreadful realization that all our waifus are dead. Although, I guess that isn't too bad considering my waifu has been dead for 400 years at this point, but my point is that it would have been irritating if they stuck the opening right in the middle of that. Plus, giving the audience time to process what they were shown probably would have broken the immersion. I know that might seem insignificant, but when we're talking about a masterpiece, every detail matters. Subaru dies a mysterious death and then respawns again at the Appa salesman, looking even more confused than us viewers. He's obviously traumatized, yet conscious enough to hug Rem out of pure desperation, giving us viewers our only moment of relief in the entire episode. Rem's character was beginning to shine a lot more at this point in the story, but this part of the episode did a fantastic job emphasizing how valuable Rem is to Subaru. It's heartbreaking, bittersweet, and uncomfortable to watch because us viewers and Subaru both know that something terrible awaits her, and the outcome isn't likely to improve if Subaru remains in his current state. The previous arc spent a lot of time building up Rem's animosity towards the witch cult, making her confrontation with them here a lot more significant. Rem finally comes face to face with the source of all her life's hatred, yet all she cares about right now is protecting Subaru. So instead of hatred, she's fighting the witch cult because of love, and I thought that was pretty poetic. Also, this brief action sequence was beautifully choreographed and very visually pleasing. Anyway, after the witch cult was built up for 15 episodes, we finally get to meet one of its leaders, which recontextualizes everything we've been hearing about the organization and puts a face to the villains in our imagination. But we already know that the witch cult is evil and crazy, so Betelgeuse fit the description we imagined he would have, yet he still shocked us despite meeting our expectations. Also, if Betelgeuse was in any other anime, he probably would have been laughed at. In theory, his character is so over the top and silly it should have been a challenge to take him seriously and almost impossible to be afraid of him. But instead, what ReZero gave us was the greatest introduction to a villain in anime history. Until now, the focus of this episode was Subaru's broken mental state, but Betelgeuse makes him look totally sane in comparison. He quickly establishes himself as the ultimate maniac who spews out ridiculous nonsense about love and sloth, and yet, somehow, a lot of it makes sense. Betelgeuse has this obsession with the witch that feels oddly reminiscent of Subaru's obsession with Emilia. So when Subaru grows to hate Betelgeuse later this episode, he doesn't realize that what he hates is essentially an extreme version of himself. But symbolism aside, even though everything about Betelgeuse feels wrong, his dialogue holds a certain weight, unfitting for that of a madman. For example, one sentence from Betelgeuse was enough to convince 90% of the fanbase that Subaru is the Archbishop of Pride. Alright, that's a bad example. But Betelgeuse can sound oddly reasonable with the right context. Despite his willingness to kill his own followers over nothing, self-harm for no reason, and torture his victims while mocking them, I think the scariest thing about Betelgeuse was actually his intuition. He accuses Subaru of faking his insanity because although Subaru was clearly traumatized, for some reason his reactions were normal. He was sane enough to feel comforted by Rem, scared of Betelgeuse, and angry when Rem was tortured. A crazy person would have been unaffected by all of that, so from the perspective of Betelgeuse, Subaru was acting. It's left unclear whether or not Subaru was doing so intentionally, but Betelgeuse was right. The narration in the novel makes note of Subaru's apparent separation from reality, which was really just a state of extreme shock. While in shock, Subaru could have subconsciously acted crazy or even convinced himself he was crazy, most likely as a means of escapism. Ironically, most of us started watching ReZero as a means of escapism, but the true significance of Subaru's mental state was how perfectly Betelgeuse understood it. Just by watching him, Betelgeuse immediately recognized all of his weaknesses, including his false insanity, and that was a very frightening bit of characterization for Betelgeuse. My point though is that the author could have just written Subaru as insane, and that would have made sense to all of us. But it's these minor details like characters having psychological ambiguity that allowed ReZero to introduce such a goofy, obnoxious villain in a terrifying, magnificent way. He was very in-your-face and cartoonish, but that only made the few few moments when Betelgeuse didn't seem crazy a lot scarier. The first time we saw, or didn't see, his authority of sloth was absolutely horrifying. After about 7 minutes of him spazzing out like your dog does when you get home, Betelgeuse gets really calm all of a sudden, the music stops, and then something happens to Rem. Nothing can replace that what the fuck feeling of confusion, despair, and hopelessness. The sudden realization that Betelgeuse had a supernatural ability this entire time, along with the emotional impact of watching Rem lose after a whole arc built her up and forced us to love her, amounted to an incredible moment. The torture scene that follows it was brutally gruesome, yet not nearly as disturbing as the mockery that makes it impossible for us to not hate Betelgeuse. What this episode did best was convey powerful emotions to the viewer effortlessly, and if you weren't already a Rem fan at this point, then her dying breath confession turned you into one. Absolutely heart-wrenching, and of course these emotional moments were only made possible by the voice acting and the music. Subaru's visceral cries encapsulated that feeling of absolute desperation, but had Betelgeuse's VA not delivered one of the greatest vocal performances ever, this episode couldn't have been the masterpiece that it was. The voice acting had to transcend perfection, and it absolutely did. As for the music, it's always amazing in Re:Zero, but Kenichiro Suehiro's greatest masterpiece is called Requiem of Silence. It's one of the most powerful works ever composed, and to this day I can't listen to it without getting emotional. In any other episode, this song would have felt out of place because the episode wouldn't have been worthy of having it. Yet, as if the stars aligned, every beat felt like it fit each individual frame of this final sequence and built a beautiful bridge to this episode's conclusion. With one of the greatest soundtracks ever playing behind him, Subaru carries Rem's lifeless body as he journeys aimlessly towards the mansion. Why exactly? I wasn't sure, and neither was Subaru. With Rem dead, he should understand that there's no reason for him to continue the current loop. Several episodes ago, when Rem died from the curse, Subaru jumped off the cliff, killing himself to bring her back to life. Yet now, his feet continue to step forward meaninglessly towards an uncertain destination, carrying Rem's body through the snow until somehow he reaches the mansion and then faces the destruction he previously wanted to hide from. And until then, Subaru didn't know his hatred for Betelgeuse was the reason he continued living. But again, because Betelgeuse is the symbolic extreme of Subaru's character flaws, a lot of that hatred was redirected to himself. And just when we think this episode has already made us feel every emotion possible, we get mind-pucked. A giant beast bursts out of the mansion, delivers mysterious dialogue, Subaru's head falls off, the credits roll down, the music intensifies, the snow piles up, and we all just sit there staring at our screen through our tears, wondering what the puck just happened. How we felt at the end of that episode was exactly how Subaru felt at the beginning. They even added a little scene after the credits to show the progress Subaru made and the lesson he learned. The episode was structured like a movie because it resembled one in quality. But due to the emotional toll this episode inflicted, Puck's Beast of the End reveal was almost unsurprising, simply because it looks like it belongs in a nightmare, and this episode had already convinced me I was having one. What shocked me more than the big monster though was the cinematic brilliance of the credit roll, which was also the moment I realized I was in the middle of watching my favorite anime. Not only was I amazed by what this episode meant for the story I just became extremely invested in, but also how its quality transcended anything I'd ever seen before. After the roller coaster of emotions they packed into what was already a masterpiece, the way it concluded was beyond my comprehension. Honestly, if the series ended right there, I wouldn't have been mad because I knew immediately that nothing would ever top this episode. A lot of Re:Zero fans prefer episode 18, and believe me, that's also one of the best anime episodes I've ever seen, but episode 18 isn't shit compared to this one. And they knew that too. Re:Zero doesn't do rolling credits unless they know they've made a truly phenomenal episode, or if they're trying to replicate one. The Value of Life, for example, was certainly a phenomenal episode, but it was supposed to rival the quality of episode 15 and was even modeled after it. It copied the exact structure of season 1's masterpiece, yet couldn't match its quality. Although The Value of Life did become one of Re:Zero's best episodes, it's also evidence that episode 15 can't be replicated. Of course, the production team was different, but I don't think even the original team could make another episode 15. Like I said, it felt like a miracle how every element complemented the others as flawlessly as they did, and I'm not saying the quality was accidental, but I do think a certain degree of luck was necessary to accomplish that. I'm a huge fan of Re:Zero, and I really loved season 2, but what it lacked was a distinctive masterpiece episode. And Omega, but anyway. I'm not a film expert or anything, just someone on the internet internet with an opinion. If you agree with it or disagree with it, please let me know in the comments. I'm like the only YouTuber that still reads all of them because, I don't know, maybe one of you will change my mind. I'm gonna have some more seasonal anime videos coming soon, but thank you for watching. I'm out for now. Keep talking about ReZero. Peace out.